Hello, thanks for joining me. This is Jessie, and this is my channel, The Caffeinated Bookworm, and today I'm reading to you from The Forgotten Room by Lincoln Child. Chapter 1. It was perhaps the most unusual sight ever beheld on the august and stately grounds of the Glasgow Institute of Science, founded in 1761 by grant of charter from George III. A large podium, studded with microphones, had been erected on the great lawn, directly in front of the administration building. Before it had been set some 36 folding chairs on which reporters from local newspapers, the Times of London, Nature, Oceanography, Time Magazine, and a host of others. To the right of the podium were two television cameras, one from BBC, the other from CNN. To the podium's left was a large wooden scaffold, upon which sat a large, strange-looking machine of dark metal, a cross between a cigar tube and a pincushion, about 30 feet long, with a bulky attachment protruding from its upper edge. The restless chatter among the reporters grew muted as the main doors to the administration building opened, and two men stepped out into the September afternoon sunlight. One was plump and short, with a shock of white hair, and wearing a thick tweed coat. The other was tall and quite thin, with rather severe features, light brown hair, and alert gray eyes. Unlike the first man, he was dressed in a conservative dark suit. The two approached the podium, and the older man cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press," he began, "thank you for coming. I am Colin Reed, Provost of the Glasgow Institute of Science, and to my right is Jeremy Logan." Reed took a sip from a glass of water on one side of the podium, cleared his throat again. "You may well know Dr. Logan's work. He is perhaps the only, and certainly the preeminent, enigmologist operating in the world today. His job is to investigate, interpret, and explain the, for lack of a better word, unexplainable. He throws light upon riddles of history. He separates myth from truth and the natural from the supernatural." At Reed's side, Jeremy Logan frowned slightly, as if uncomfortable with this bit of panegyric. "About 2 months ago, we contacted Dr. Logan on his home ground of Yale University and asked him to undertake an assignment for us. That assignment can be briefly explained: to definitively prove or disprove the existence of the creature popularly referred to as the Loch Ness Monster. Dr. Logan has spent the last 6 weeks in Inverness doing precisely that. I will now ask him to share his findings with you." Reed stepped back from the microphones, and Logan approached. He surveyed the crowd of reporters for a moment, then began to speak. His voice was relatively low and mild, the mid-Atlantic accent contrasting with Reed's Scottish burr. "The Loch Ness Monster," he began, "is the most famous of all the supposed Scottish lake monsters, perhaps the most famous of all cryptids. The Institute's aim in hiring me for this particular task was not to stunt the local tourism industry or put peddlers of Loch Ness iconography out of business. Rather, it was to put a stop to the amateur and misguided attempts at searching for the creature, attempts that have been on the increase recently and at least twice in the last year have resulted in an increase of deaths by drowning." He took a sip from his own glass water. "I quickly realized that proving the existence of the creature required only one thing: observing it in its element. Proving that the creature does not exist, however, would require a great deal more work. Technology would be my greatest ally. Hence I persuaded the United States Navy, of which I was once a part, to lend me this one-man research submersible." And Logan waved at the strange-looking machine sitting on the wooden scaffold to his right. "The submersible is equipped with continuous wave radar, synthetic aperture sonar, pulse compression, echolocating devices, and numerous other technology for both underwater mapping and target acquisition. There were two important factors to take into account. First, the loch is quite long and unusually deep, 750 feet in places. Second, the so-called sighting of the creature suggested a morphology similar to a plesiosaur, which would put it at something between 20 and 40 feet in length. There were several unknown variables to contend with, of course, such as the creature's range of movement and environmental preferences, but these could not be determined until such a time as it was located. I began by familiarizing myself with the features of the submersible and the layout of the loch, both above and below the surface. My service in the Navy made the former relatively straightforward. I spent 1 week in the shakedown period, during which time I uncovered no sign of the creature. Next, I had the Institute procure for me some netting, rather a lot of netting, in fact. Using spool of military-grade nylon mesh, we put together a net 10,000 feet by 800 feet. This brought a murmur of surprise. What came next was rather tedious. After the first few run-throughs, however, quite straightforward. I was lucky in the fact that the lock, although some 20 miles long, is not particularly wide, just under 2 miles at its widest point. We started at the northernmost part of the lock and worked south. My work was aided by 2 research assistants from the Institute and 2 motor launches out of Inverness. Each day, using the submersible, I would comb an area of the lock consisting of a single mile in a southerly direction. A mile-long slice of the lock, as it were, along the X, Y, and Z axes. For each of these discrete slices, I would make 3 separate passes at different depths, using the submersible's movement and targeting technologies to search for any objects the size of the creature. This equipment has significant range and precision. Had any object of the requisite size been in the slice, I would have located it. At the end of each day, with the help of the research assistants, one on each shore of the lock and the 2 boats on the lock itself, I moved the netting 1 mile forward to the terminal point of my search for that day. This vast mesh covered the entire lock laterally, like an anti-submarine net. The mesh was broad enough for any normal fish to swim through without difficulty, but narrow enough to prevent anything larger than 40 centimeters wide from passing. Watercraft were dealt with on a one-by-one basis. Each day I explored an additional 1 mile slice of the lock, searching for the creature. At the end of the day, as mentioned, we pulled the net forward another mile. After 20 days, we reached the southern end of the lock without result. And so, ladies and gentlemen, you can take as fact the 4 words I'm about to speak, though I speak them with some regret, since I enjoy cryptozoology legends as much as the next man. There ain't no Nessie. This was greeted with applause, a scattering of laughter. A low sound became audible in the distance, a droning, repetitive thudding. As the sound drew closer, it became identifiable as helicopter blades cutting through the air. Then a fat chopper with military markings appeared over a nearby hilltop lined with red brick row houses. It approached quickly now, an American Navy aircraft, then descended, hovering directly over the great lawn and the dark gray submersible. Grass flattened out in a circular direction, and the reporters were forced to grab hats and papers to prevent them from flying. A technician in a jumpsuit trotted out a side door of the administration building, climbed up the wooden scaffolding, and attached 2 huge hooks that had been reeled out of the helicopter's belly onto fastenings on the upper surface of the submersible. He crawled back down, gave a thumbs up, and the helicopter began to rise gingerly, the craft swaying beneath it. Higher and higher it climbed, and then it turned slowly and began heading eastward, its peculiar cargo trailing behind it by the 2 lifelines. Within 60 seconds, it was gone. The entire operation had taken less than 5 minutes. Logan watched the distant horizon for a minute, then turned back to the press. And now, he said, I would be happy to answer your questions as fully as I can. 3 hours later, in the snug of the Edwardian-era bar within Glasgow's most opulent hotel, the same 2 persons, Colin Reed and Jeremy Logan, toasted each other over glasses of a peaty single malt scotch served neat. An excellent performance, Reed was saying. And I don't just mean at the press conference today. An excellent performance from beginning to end. Acting is new to me, Logan replied, but it's nice to know that if the ghost hunting business ever dries up, I can always supplement my Yale salary by treading the boards. I would be happy to answer your questions as fully as I can, Reed said, chuckling at the memory. Nice bit of prevarication, that. He took a sip of his scotch. I think we can safely say that with today's announcement, in addition to the new rules that have been instituted regarding use of watercraft in the lock, all this hunting for the monster will die off. That's the plan. Reed started as if forgetting something. Oh, yes. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a slender envelope. Here's your stipend. I feel bad taking money from the Institute, Logan said as he pocketed the envelope, but I console myself with the thought that it's recompense for the damage my reputation would suffer should the truth ever become known. We thank you, and more important, I'm sure Nessie thanks you. The provost paused. You have the data with you? Logan nodded. And you still believe the best thing is to destroy it? It's the only option. What if those images got into the open, or God forbid went viral on the internet? It would undo everything we've accomplished. I'll burn them as soon as I get up to my room. You're right, of course. Reed hesitated. May I have one last look? Of course. Logan glanced around the bar, then unlocked the zero Halliburton attaché case that sat on the banquette beside him, extracted a folder, and passed it to Reed. The man took it, opened it, leafed through the pages within, his eyes glittering with hungry fascination. The pages contained images produced from a variety of technologies: acoustic backscatter, synthetic aperture pulse, active beamforming sonar. The images all showed the same thing in different positions and from different angles: a creature with a bulky, ovoid body, lateral fins, and a long, slender neck. Reed lingered over the images for a moment. Then, with a rueful sigh, he closed the folder and passed it back to Logan. Just as Logan was returning his attaché case, a man in the hotel's uniform walked up to their table. "Dr. Logan?" he asked. Logan nodded. "There's a call for you. It's waiting at the front desk." Logan frowned. "I'm in the middle of a meeting. Can it wait?" The man shook his head. "No, sir. I'm afraid the party on the line said it was a matter most urgent." Most urgent. And I think I'm going to stop at chapter 1. So that's a little, I guess it's misleading. It's not about Nessie. Let me read to you the inside flap. Professor Logan, the quirky and charismatic enigmologist who specializes in solving problems of the strange or seemingly unnatural variety, receives an urgent summons from the director of Lux, the oldest and most respected think tanks in America. An unexplainable tragedy has taken place in the sprawling compound located on the coastline of Newport, Rhode Island. One of Lux's most distinguished doctors, overcome by erratic behavior, violently attacked his assistant before meeting with a gruesome, self-inflicted end. Deeply shaken by the incident and the bizarre evidence left behind from the doctor's final project, as well as recent troubling behavior among several of the think tank's other scientists, Lux fears there is something more sinister occurring within its walls and looks to Jeremy Logan to investigate. Logan quickly makes a surprise discovery. In a long dormant wing of the estate, he uncovers an ingeniously hidden secret room, unknown and untouched for decades. The room is essentially a time capsule filled with eerie machinery and obscure references to a top-secret experiment known as Project S. As Logan attempts to unravel its meaning, he begins to discern what transpired in that room and why the frightening project was suddenly abandoned and sealed off many years before. As his work draws him ever deeper into harm's way, Logan soon unleashes a series of catastrophic events upon the rest of Lux and himself. One of Lincoln Child's most thrilling novels to date, The Forgotten Room is replete with exhilarating action, veiled history, and mesmerizing science, making for a truly intelligent page turner. That's one of the things that I love about Preston and Child, Lincoln Child, and Douglas Preston. They write the Agent Pendergast novels, and this is not one of the Agent Pendergast novels. This is a standalone novel, which is why I'm reading it to you. But even if you were to pick up one of the Agent Pendergast novels, they are essentially all standalone novels. They are all part of the same series, I guess, but they're not something that you have to read book 1 before you read book 2 or book 5 or book 10. There's quite a few of them. Anyways, thank you so much for joining me this Saturday on my Saturday Storytime. Like and subscribe below, and you have a wonderful weekend.